Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thank you all for joining me here. If you are here for the art of selecting an accelerator, setting your business up for success, you are in the right place. Thank you all for joining today. A few things to help you get situated in our space today is that our conversation here today will be globally focused. So we'll be talking about how to select an accelerator from across the globe. So it doesn't matter where you're joining from, this will apply to you and the context in which you're joining. So, the art of selecting accelerator, it is a very particular name, and I would love to just let you all know that I was intentional about that name. I do think selecting an accelerator is an art, not a science. There is many different ways to go about it and to select an accelerator that is a good fit for you. There isn't one formula that works. I'm going to share a bunch of tips and a bunch of different ways to guide you in this process. You can choose which tips to take, which not to take, which work for you, which don't. This is definitely more of an art than a science. So that was an intentional naming choice. So, my aim today is to share insights to help you on your journey to find the right accelerator. Get selected and then make the most of the opportunity once you are selected. I come with a lot of knowledge and insights about the inside of this process, and I believe there is a lot of mystery around this process that I want to remove for you all so that you're set up for success in finding the right accelerator for your business. So, on the agenda today, introductions. I'd love to know who is in the room. So, go ahead and let's start by engaging the chat. So, I want you to type in the chat your name, where you are from, and one accelerator that you are interested in joining so that we can see what everyone else's interests are. I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat so you don't have to remember that. There we go. So let's go ahead and get that chat activated as I introduce our agenda for today. So, why join an accelerator? We're going to go over that process and answer that question. Then, like I said, I bring a lot of insider information and knowledge, and I'm going to sort of demystify the process of admissions and applying so that you'll have all of the knowledge to build a strong application. I will have some tips to set you up for success in building that strong application. And I'll explain a little bit more about my background as I introduce myself, but I bring quite an extensive background in admissions, and I do believe that some of these tips will be valuable no matter what you apply to in the future, whether it's a program, an accelerator, or grad school, a PhD. These are some tips that I think will come in handy in the future. I will talk a little bit about finding an accelerator. I will say that I'll spend the least amount of time on this particular step because there are many places online that you can go hunting and in the community that you can go hunting, but we will touch on that as well. I have two folks that shared a little video for me about making the most of the accelerator experience. I'll introduce them in a minute as well. And I'm going to share a little video of them as our final point of information. Hopefully we'll have some time for a Q&A. I don't think we'll have a lot of time for a Q&A, so do save those questions if you have them, and we'll put them in the chat, or we'll do raising of your hands if you're able to come off mute at the final, probably I would say the final 10 minutes of this session and of our time together. So these are the experts you're going to have today. First, you're going to hear from me. I'm Miranda Williamson. I am the Director of Recruiting at Seed Spot. We are an accelerator that works with underrepresented founders. Before that, I worked for an organization called Watson Institute, which was also an accelerator for underrepresented founders. Now, with SeedSpot, I mostly work with US-based founders. We're not exclusively US. At Watson Institute, I mostly worked with founders from across the globe. Very few US founders, in fact, mostly founders across the globe. Before that, I came into this particular career working in admissions and recruiting for graduate programs in social innovation, peace and justice, and conflict resolution. So I come from a variety of different contexts, but always building recruiting and admissions infrastructure that helped the organizations that I worked for in social impact find the talented, incredible individuals to join the programs. So what I did in my background is about 10 years in this field, so a lot of information and knowledge to share with you all. And I did for a while run free webinars on demystifying grad school application process to help individuals find access to graduate programs and really understand that admissions and enrollment process. As I mentioned, I have a couple experts today. I'll be sharing a video where they share some information, and one of them is Samuel Lastini. Samuel Lastini is a founder of Wakalumi in CC Initiative and project lead at Empower and Serve Kenya Social Innovation. Samuel and I met many years ago. Samuel was looking for a program to help him with regenerative agriculture in Kenya. He was working on planter boxes that individuals in his particular village could use in their backyards to specifically grow kale and Swiss chard because there was a malnourishment problem in his village. He was very intentional about wanting a US-based program because of the importance of learning regenerative agricultural processes. He came to Watson Institute, where I was previously working, as I mentioned, and then from there received a full ride fellowship to a program on the East Coast where he came and learned about regenerative agricultural processes. Alexis Amani Simbehui. He is a friend of mine, has been a friend of mine for many years. He was originally interested in master's programs that I worked for, and him and I stayed in touch for the past 7 years. And he was able to join one of my programs, again at Watson Institute, where he was able to attend that program and gained quite a bit of funding, donor relationships, networks, and turned his business at Sheer Love Rwanda, which provides education and housing to street children. He was able to find them, able to accelerate his business and move from 21 folks being in his program and supporting 21 street children to now 55. So he really has increased his impact by attending accelerators. These two individuals are very important to me, and I'm really excited to share some of their knowledge at the end of this conversation. First, before we dive in, there's a lot of definitions floating out there that I think are really important to talk about. Accelerator, incubator, program, and sometimes these names are used interchangeably. So let's just define them so that we know what we're talking about when we use each. And they do have some overlap. So accelerator is usually a set time. It could be a cost. Sometimes it takes equity in your company, and they're usually a cohort based. So it's a set time. Maybe it's 8 weeks, 10 weeks, maybe it's a year where you're meant to gain a certain amount of traction in that set time. An incubator is a bit different. It's often local for local startups. It often includes a physical space, although in this more global and virtual world, sometimes that's not the case, but that is often the case, a physical space where you are meant to incubate your startup towards a certain amount of progress rather than a specific time frame. Where there is some overlap is often both of these accelerators and incubators include mentoring, education, and networks. That is something that both include. Programs are a bit different. Programs maybe are their degree granting or maybe they're certificate granting. They're often cohorts. They're often not exclusive. So sometimes there's a very low barrier to entry to join a program. And they do usually have a cost associated with them. Now, let me also say there's prizes, pitch competitions, and grants as well. Those are all different. Often pitch competitions are something you just join to share your pitch. It does not come with many of these components, but it is something you can apply to and perhaps pitch your venture and receive funding for. So I have a couple of definitions I'd like to share with you all that I liked. And these are not my definitions, but I like them and I'd like to read the accelerator one to you. Accelerators are spaces where most mature startups will have intense contact with the entrepreneurial and innovation universe to transform their business and make them attractive to large investment in a short time. The main focus of an accelerator is to ensure the scalability of the business that resides in it. So, what I liked about this definition was that it included this idea that we're in a specific universe, an entrepreneurial universe. I find that to be really true. As I mentioned, I worked in graduate programs before. The language of graduate programs, the deliverables of graduate programs, aka homework, was very different than this startup ecosystem. And accelerators are a space where you're introduced to what this universe is like, what this ecosystem is like. Now I'm going to share a definition of an incubator. A business incubator is a program that gives very early stage companies access to mentorship, investors, and other support to help them get established. Very basic definition. I like the simplicity of that definition and wanted to share it with you all. Mostly today, we're going to be talking about accelerators. So keep that in mind as we move through the rest of our conversation. So I was very intentional about the way that I framed this conversation in the order in which it goes in. So it may seem like quite a jump for us to jump from giving definitions to now talking about the admissions process. But I think it's very important for you to understand this step of the journey. So I'm going to go ahead and go with it. We're going to go ahead and move through talking about how the admissions process works. All right. So the admissions process can flow in this beautiful way that I show here very visually. You can often attend an info session. I always have them for my programs in whatever field I've worked in. I always have info sessions available. And those are usually big group sessions that you can learn more about the program. It's a great space to get information. If a program has an info session, I encourage you to attend or to look for one so that you can learn more about the program. It helps you also understand your audience as you craft your application, which is very valuable information. You then submit your application. Almost all applications now are a virtual submission. So you submit that. And don't worry, we'll talk a lot more about what an application looks like, how you can make a strong application, and how to make this process much easier for you. I think it can often be a really daunting process. And because of that, sometimes our applications don't reflect the traction we've made and reflect the incredible businesses that you all have because it's too much. If you're applying to 4 accelerators, that's a lot. Don't worry, I'll help you. I hope you can leave this conversation today feeling comfortable and feeling much more at ease with a process like that. Your application is then reviewed by someone like myself, usually a team of folks. It'll be usually 2 to 3 folks on the admissions team that review and score your application. I am part of a network of individuals who are in admissions for accelerator programs. So I've learned a lot about what a review process looks like. And I will say that it's often a holistic review. And this is important for you to understand and understand what I mean by that, because, for example, law schools, a lot of universities have like scores you have to meet. And then if you don't meet those scores, your LSAT scores, these test scores, these GPA scores, which are grade point average, then your application's thrown out. That the vast majority of the time for these accelerator programs, that is not the case. They're looking at every piece of your application and they're looking at you and your business as a whole in order to make determination and to make scoring decisions. And that is really crucial because sometimes if you don't meet one of the minimums, I would encourage you to still apply. Apply. For example, I just ran a program, an accelerator program with a partner organization in Washington, D.C. And we originally said we wanted our minimum revenue generation for these different businesses and startups coming into our program to be 25K. So that's $25,000 minimum revenue. Once we started receiving some applications, we were very inspired as an admissions team by some of the individuals who were at like perhaps that $15,000, 15K mark. And we ended up admitting about half of the cohort below the 25K mark because we were so inspired by their businesses. So I say that to also encourage you all to take that risk and take that chance. Oftentimes, an admissions process has an interview component. It usually is with someone like myself. Again, I'm not scary. I'm very nice. I'm very supportive. I want to get to know you as an individual in the interview process. Definitely show up to those, though, as if that's a professional interaction. You want to show up dressed for success in whatever cultural context you are in. It doesn't have to be a Western view of what success dressed for professional it looks like. It can be from within your context. But show up with a good internet connection, show up ready to focus and make sure there's no background noise, show up on time. That is a professional interaction, and you never know where that professional interaction can lead. And so you want to put your best self forward in that interview. You'll then be evaluated based on your application and interview responses for program fit. Sometimes there are behind the scene things that you don't know about. That, for example, perhaps it's a program it's a social impact program, and they want half the cohort to be in one field and half the cohort to be in another. For example, maybe they want individuals in the cohort to be working on environmental sustainability and individuals in the cohort to be working on access to education. And maybe you fall into one of those buckets, and that is excellent and you're a good fit, or maybe they're to have too many entrepreneurs already in one of those buckets. And sometimes, so The reason I say that is sometimes it's not personal. It's not a reflection on your business. It's not a reflection on the impact you're creating. It's just a reflection on the behind the scenes things that you have no control over. Much like a job interview in many ways, they're looking for that cohort cohesiveness. You would then receive an acceptance letter, and oftentimes you'd be asked to sign an agreement. And that agreement often is in relation to your participation and engagement to the cohort. I want to add a little caveat here that if you think you'll be unable to participate in the program fully, it's much better not to join an accelerator if you can't engage, if you think you might not be able to engage, than to join and hope that things work out. I have worked with founders before who joined a cohort and overcommitted, and it ended up damaging their relationships with some of their board advisors. They lost potential funding. At the beginning of the program, they were set up to receive 200K investment through the accelerator, but because they couldn't participate fully, because they were overcommitted in many areas, it really ended up damaging their chances of getting that investment. They did not receive that investment and they did damage relationships. So I really highly encourage you to think critically about whether or not you can participate in the accelerator that you were accepted into. There's no harm in deferring and no harm in not accepting an offer if it's not the right fit at that time. Okay, we're getting to a part that I love of this conversation, which is building a strong application. Why do I love this? Because I've read thousands of applications in my career, thousands. And I love reading those stories that stand out. And I have a lot of insider information to share about how to make your application stand out. So, some pitfalls to avoid when building your application. Do not answer the questions with one sentence. There's no way you can tell the story of yourself as an entrepreneur and your business in just one sentence. I know you all have so much more to say. If you are given 250 words to answer a question, use that 250 words. Use it all because you have that. Don't lose sight of the prompts. You want to respond directly to each prompt. I've seen quite often folks lose sight of the prompts, and really what happens is they begin telling me why the work they're doing is important. And they'll be citing journal articles and they'll be bringing in references and they'll be convincing me why, for example, recycling is important and why their social impact venture, building recycling in their community is so important. They're losing sight of the prompt in that case because if they thought of who the audience was, me, I'm part of the audience. I'm the director of a social impact organization. I understand why recycling is important. I'd rather them spend time and use that space telling me how they are going to solve this issue, how their business is different than the competitors out there. So remember that grammar is important. So in some cases, this application will be used to promote your work. And you want to make sure that you show up in a really positive light. And what I mean by that is, for example, when I'm working with external partners, when I'm working with partners maybe of big organizations like Humana Foundation, Volunteers of America, Walmart Center for Racial Equity, these external businesses, I will copy and paste information from within your application to share with these external partners. It's not shared publicly, but it's shared amongst the individuals working on these accelerator programs. And you want to make sure that you put your best self and your best version of yourself forward. Tips for a strong application. Be very specific. The strongest applications are very specific. And I see a lot of mistakes happen when you're describing what your business does. I think a lot of folks assume a certain amount of knowledge. For example, I judge at these pitch masters competitions or pitch masters events where entrepreneurs come in and share their pitches, and then I give feedback on the pitches. And the biggest mistake folks make is assuming that I understand a lot of the acronyms, a lot of the jargon of the field that they're coming from. Maybe their venture is a med tech or an ed tech, which is education and medical fields, and maybe they're assuming that I have some sort of knowledge about those fields, and there's a lot of context lost. Really, just assume that your application reviewer knows nothing about your field and needs to hear you spell out how you are solving the problem you're solving, how you are doing the work that you're doing. Personal story. What drives you? This is really important to me. I really love to know the personal story behind the entrepreneur. What connects you to the community that you are working with? What connects you to your customer? What drives you to do this work as an entrepreneur? And I'll share a bit about Amani, who I introduced earlier. Amani was a street child during the 1994 genocide. He was orphaned and gained access to education after he was put in jail, and learned from one of his fellow cellmates how to read, and decided he was going to go join a school. Through high school, which he attended much later in life, he excelled and received a full ride scholarship to an online university where he got his bachelor's degree and began his work with street children there and building a social enterprise from there. That story is incredible. And that connection to the work that he does means that he is the correct person to be doing this work. He understands the challenges that these children are facing and understands the best way to support them. That story is so important. And then submit your application early if you can. If you hear about the deadline last minute, then it's better to get a strong application in on the deadline than a weak application in early. But if you are able to, always submit your application early. And I'll tell you why. Again, this is insider information that you would never know. But for paid programs, which I have worked for quite a few paid programs, I've worked for paid programs. Master's programs I worked for were $100,000 per program. The programs I worked for at Watson Institute, we had paid programs there. And at Seed Spot, we have fee-based programs as well. And sometimes we would receive donors, we would receive scholarships or discount opportunities. And if I had applications available to advocate for receiving a scholarship, I would. I would put forth applications and ask for them to receive full ride fellowships. But I could only do that if those applications were in early. So that was one reason. The other reason is sometimes I would read an application and I would notice something that was missing. And if I had time, I would go ahead and email those candidates. I want you to succeed. I want you to have a strong application. So I'd email them and ask for more information or more details so that I could fix the error in the application. But I could only do that if I had time before the program started to get that done. So getting that application in early is very critical. Additional tips. So, letters of recommendation are actually really important. Previous success is a great predictor of future success. So, if the accelerator or master's program asks for letters of recommendation, be really intentional about who you ask to do those letters of recommendation for you. Those are excellent ways to get something, get some more I don't know, get some more uh, praise, get some praise in there for you. And you can ask your letters of your recommenders to say something specific about you, like um, Emmanuel, it was in the top 10% of entrepreneurs I've ever advised, or something along those lines that stands out. Those are really valuable. So get mentors, get individuals who know you well, get previous professors, individuals who can speak to how awesome you are. I have a letter of recommendation template, a great template for requesting a letter of recommendation. I'll go ahead and include that when I send out my follow-up email. I think that'll be really helpful for you all. Next is resume, and that is showing your experience. So make every line count, and these actually really matter. Let me tell you why. Let's say you are building a business in retail and you want to get into mass retail. So you're building a product, a consumer packaged good product, and you want to get into retail. And all throughout college, you worked in retail, and you think maybe that doesn't matter. It actually does. The fact that you have inside experience in retail and you are building a retail focused business, that's really valuable. And we do want to see that. In interview, I already talked a bit about interviews earlier, so I won't go on about it, but that is a great opportunity to demonstrate professionalism, to show your personality, to have a conversation. Oftentimes, questions, you'll be able to ask questions in the interview, so bring some questions and bring questions beyond the financial piece of the program. Ask questions about the content of the program. Video. Okay. Many programs these days ask for a short video. And this is a great opportunity to show your personality. I love the short video component of an application. What you do not need to do is worry about having a highly edited video or really great video skills. You can simply record it on your iPhone. What's more important is showing your personality in that video. I had an applicant to one of my programs talk about how he was a juicer. He not literally, he was figuratively a juicer. And as he was telling me about his skills and why he was the best for a social innovation program, he was saying like, I've got critical thinking, and he would drop the vegetable in the juicer. And it was simply just an iPhone setup, but he was showing that he'd really thought about the responses. He'd taken time to make the video interesting. He was showing his quirky personality. So that's what the video content should show, and that's what we want to see. Your pitch deck. Oftentimes, these applications will ask for your pitch deck. Make sure it's visual. So you'll want to have images and pictures in your pitch deck and very clear. You can find great templates on Canva for building a sample pitch deck. You can get great support and feedback on your pitch deck through organizations like I mentioned earlier called Pitch Masters. I volunteer at Pitch Masters once a month to give feedback to entrepreneurs who are sharing their pitch deck. So you can get a lot of free feedback and guidance before you submit your pitch deck to these accelerator programs so that you're showing up with your best version of yourself. I will say there are a lot of accelerators as well where they're more like starting at the beginning. They're helping you build your pitch deck. So it just depends on what level of accelerator you're applying to. Then I can't stress this next one enough. Every interaction counts. So what I mean by that is I am I'm working for a small organization. We only have 30 employees at our organization. I have a lot of decision-making autonomy when it comes to reviewing applications. And I do take into consideration how the entrepreneurs that I interact with show up. If they are showing up on time to their interview, if their emails are cordial, if they are setting up phone calls with me, that all matters. So just be your best self when you're interacting with the individuals who work for the accelerator program, because those interactions do count. And even if they don't count for getting into that particular accelerator, I will tell you that I remember those interactions, and I have nominated so many individuals who I've worked with and didn't get into my programs for other programs that they then got into and went on to participate in because I was so impressed by them, so impressed by their businesses, so impressed by them as individuals that are doing this incredible work. And I really cared about them. And I have connections with other folks from other incubators, and I would say, hey, they weren't the good fit for my program, but I think they're a good fit for your program. I'd like to nominate them. And that has been very successful for many individuals I've interacted with. All right, how to find an accelerator. This this is one of the briefest parts of our conversation. I'm going to go ahead and go over some tips on getting clarity on your business, and then I'll go over some actual logistical how and where do you find an accelerator. So first and foremost, get clarity on what industries your business falls in before you begin your search. And I threw out some terms earlier that I'm going to highlight again, and that's like med tech, ed tech. These are industries that different businesses fall into. I can't possibly go over all of them, but do some hunting, have some conversations to find out what your product, your business, what industries it falls into so that you have a better sense of how to hunt for these accelerators. Know the stage your venture or business is in. Super important. I see a lot of folks getting this incorrect in applications, but there are idea phase accelerators out there. So if you are in the idea phase, you can find the accelerator that's best going to support you in that phase. Do not lie about that phase. But I'm going to give you some definitions for each of these phases. So idea has made research and has an idea for a business, but you really don't have the foundation yet. That's totally fine. An accelerator can be a great place to flush out that idea, to understand it more. But be realistic if you are actually an idea. Prototype or pilot. So prototyping a business and doing customer discovery. So you actually have some foundation, but maybe you don't actually have any customers yet. But you've got some of the infrastructure built. You're ready to get into that early revenue. And then generating revenue. So you've actually introduced your product or service to market and have some revenue generated. And that early revenue could be anything from I have $100 to I have $20,000. and that's fine, but be clear that that's where you're at. Financially viable. So has or exceeded break even point. So you've spent as much in your business as you are gaining. Profitable. So profitable business, but a small team, but you're still making money. You're profitable. Growing. So has hired or is looking to hire staff is a good indication that you're growing. Scaling. So has achieved a scalable business model. So those are all stages. And just get clarity on what stage you're on. That will definitely help you understand what accelerator is a good fit. Know your needs. This is a big one. So know what you need to get out of an accelerator. This is very important. Know whether it's you need professional and personal development as a founder, because as a founder, you have to wear so many hats. You have to be good at marketing. You have to be good at the financials. You have to be good at the actual industry you're in. And and perhaps you're looking for that growth as a professional and as a leader. And accelerators can be a great place to get that. But maybe that's not your main need. Maybe you need connections to potential investors. Is that what this accelerator can offer? Maybe you're looking for a community of other individuals in your field. Is that what this accelerator offers? Really know what your specific areas of concern are so that you can ask if this accelerator is the right place for you. And finally, know your learning needs. All of these accelerators are a little bit different. Some are in person or have a hybrid component where a portion is in person and a portion's virtual. Some, like the ones at SeedSpot, are 100% virtual. Some are asynchronous learning, where you can review materials and lessons at your leisure, or some are synchronous learning where you're meeting together as a cohort and you're having breakout rooms and discussions. That is the model that SeedSpot follows. But which works best for you? Know which works best for you. If you have specific accommodation needs, for example, maybe you're visually impaired or on the spectrum. Maybe you have very specific learning needs and accommodations. Make sure the accelerator can accommodate you. At SeedSpot, we work to accommodate all types of needs, but not all accelerators have the capacity to do that. But make sure you're set up for success and that those specific needs can be accommodated by the learning styles of the particular program that you're interested in. So set yourself up for success. Again, know the focus area of the accelerator. Is it health and wellness? Is it the medical field? Is it social impact focused? Is it consumer packaged good focused? Know the focus area of the accelerator and that it fits your particular business. Know what stage of venture the accelerator works with. We went over the stages earlier. Usually, an accelerator will work with a range of stages, whether it's idea to early revenue or those later stages of business. Know which stage those accelerators work with and make sure that you fall into that bucket. Oh, one point of clarity. Remember I mentioned that holistic review process? That's where this comes back. So let's say the accelerator works with idea to early revenue and you're in the idea phase. That does not mean that you're in the lower end of who's going to be selected. Usually, what that means is they're going to select a range of folks in each of these buckets to build a cohort that can complement one another. A cohort where some people will be more advanced and others will be earlier. Some people will be in be being mentored and guided and supported by the more advanced ventures and businesses in the program. So don't get discouraged if you're on the lower end of the range as far as stage goes of your business, because that doesn't necessarily mean that you have less of a chance of getting in. Be realistic about the time it will take to build a strong application. So don't sit down with only 10 minutes to submit this application and think you're going to submit a strong application. You'll want to build a base application, and I will be sharing a template to help you with that. You'll want to build a base application, and that way for the majority of it, you can copy and paste from your base application and make edits and tweaks to speak to that specific accelerator. But that's really going to help you have a strong foundation for each of these applications and lessen the amount of labor it takes to do each of these applications. So know the basic logistics of an accelerator. Like I said, asynchronous versus synchronous. Also know the timing, especially for you folks who are around the globe. Know the time zone in which it works. There are many time zones in the US. Know if that time zone works for you. I worked for Watson Institute, as I mentioned, and that one had a time zone that functioned well for most of the globe, except for, I think, China. It was really late at night for China, but that one had a time zone that worked really well for most folks. And then I currently work for SeedSpot, and our programs are in the afternoon Eastern time. It works terrible for most folks across the globe, but works well for a lot of folks within the US. So know that time zone and know whether or not that works for you. Take advantage of the resources available by the program. And what I mean by that is most of these programs have an info session, like I said, attend those, or they have a me. And I offer anyone who's interested in my programs a 15-minute phone conversation. I please take advantage of that phone conversation. Schedule that 15-minute phone conversation with me. It's really helpful to getting more information. You can get all those questions that I said you need to get answered by the me rather than sleuthing through an internet. That's totally fine, and take advantage of that. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If you have questions, don't be afraid to ask the admissions coordinator, the admissions director, those questions. And then leverage all of the feedback you can about the process. Ask what that process, what that flow is, who your audience is when you're writing this application. Ask those questions. You can get valuable information from that. And if you do not get into a program, you are completely able to ask why. That is completely fine to ask, why didn't I get in? And I can't tell you how infrequently I get that question. And I'm completely willing to be open and transparent and share that feedback. Maybe, for example, it's something beyond your control, or maybe it's something you could easily do differently next time. I'm completely happy to share that feedback. The worst that's going to happen is I'm not going to respond to your email because I got too many, but that's not even that bad. Negotiate. This is a super uncomfortable one for many people. I have a master's degree in conflict resolution and had to take an entire course on negotiation. And so I come with a little bit of an edge in this area and would love to share with you all what I mean by negotiation. If the program has a fee, if they have scholarships, negotiate. So, for example, SeedSpot has a $1,200 fee for one of our programs. You can negotiate if you get admitted. You can say, hey, I'd love to attend SeedSpot, but This fee is a little bit too much for me, but come with power, and I will share the power that I mean. You can say, I notice that there is a similar program as this one that costs $1,000. Would you be willing to discount it to match this other program? Or I've been admitted into this other program and it's less. Would you be willing to match because Seed Spot's my first choice? Come with that level of power, that level of information. Just like you'd negotiate a salary for a job, you would come with information and come from a position of power. Again, the worst I would do is say, no, we can't do that at this time. And I still would respect you for trying and for putting forth that effort and energy. So always negotiate. And this can be done in grad schools as well. So valuable, such a valuable skill to have. Um, Absolutely. Okay, where to look? Again, I'm going to spend the least amount of time on this. Where to look? I have some suggestions for you all. Peace and Collaborative Development Network is a great place, a great newsletter to subscribe to. You'll find a lot of social impact fellowships, accelerators, and programs. It's an excellent resource for you all. They have a newsletter, a Slack channel, and on a website that's updated regularly. I recommend subscribing to the newsletter as a start. F6S is a site you can go to and put in a lot of filters that'll help you be able to find an accelerator. Nick at Noon is a social impact LinkedIn influencer. I recommend following Nick Martin on LinkedIn. He'll regularly share amazing opportunities. Again, they're mostly in the social impact field, like Peace and Collaborative Development Network. Okay, this is my biggest one, applicant repository. This is an excellent one. This is where me and colleagues I trust have put our programs and put descriptions in our program about our programs and who we're looking for. And I can't recommend this one enough. F6S is like a big, it's going to be all kinds of stuff. Peace and Collaborative Development is going to be social impact focused. Again, Nick Martin, social impact focused. Applicant repository, tons of accelerators, all from trusted organizations that I have worked closely with, I believe in. I think they're excellent. Definitely check that out. If you are international, not in the US, Opportunity Desk is a great place to find opportunities. Mostly for folks in the African continent, it's a great place to find opportunities. But again, like F6S, it's just a bunch of stuff. So it might be a bit overwhelming. Then I can't stress enough the importance of looking locally. In the US, we have these places called Better Business Bureaus. I recommend checking them out. They will have local resources, local support, and they will also can share about other local accelerators. So definitely look locally. Samuel Lastini, who I shared a little bit of introduction about him earlier, Samuel found the organization I worked through a local entrepreneurial ecosystem. And that's how I was connected to Samuel and then got him a full ride fellowship to a program in the US. But I found him because I was in contact with the local organization in Kenya. One final logistical tip on how to navigate this process. I would start by making a wish list and putting big, your big lofty goals, the big accelerators you want to participate in at the top of your list. And then around them, put these other more accessible accelerators that have lower barriers to entry. And I want you to think about it not like a linear path or or a ladder getting to these large accelerators because that's not really how entrepreneurship works. I don't think that it works that way. You're constantly shifting, changing, making adjustments. Perhaps there's a global pandemic and your entire business model changes and you need to go back to the building blocks. So I don't want you to think of it as a ladder towards these big accelerators or these lofty goals. I want you to think about it as more like I'm going to do these small journeys as they fit into my schedule and my life. I'm going to do them as it works out for me and as it fits into me, all with these larger goals in mind, all knowing that doing these small journeys are like training for a marathon. You train for a marathon and you have a training schedule and you'll have weeks where you have higher miles. You're running more. And so these are these smaller programs. You're getting your higher mileage in. And then you have back down weeks where you're doing a bit less so that you can recover and heal. And then you're ready for the big event. So I want you to think about it a little bit more like that than like constantly working upwards, constantly building. Nope, you're working on these smaller accelerators, all with these larger goals in mind. So make that list. That list will be really key, and you can always go back to that list. You do your research once, and you go back to that list. Okay. I actually, my goodness, I had so much to say that we're almost at time. So I'm going to take our last 3 minutes together to take questions. I did have a video I wanted to show up to you all with Amani and Samuel speaking about how to get the most out of an accelerator, but I'm going to go ahead and send you that video content. I have all of y'all's email addresses. I'm going to send you that video content as well as that application template. And I'm going to send you that PowerPoint that I worked from so that you have links to all of those resources I shared today. So don't worry about taking any notes. All of that is coming in your email. Our last 2 minutes, I'd love to take questions. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead and raise your hand and unmute or pop it in the chat. No questions. I answered all your questions and more. Okay. Yes, I will share actually a different version of this video where I ran this session with both Amani and Samuel because I think their voices are really valuable. Someone talking from personal experience who gained so much from accelerator programs. I mean, I can't even describe to you how much Samuel and Amani both gained from an accelerator program. They will do it better. So I will share a different version of this. Okay, well, great. Thank you all so much for joining. I'll go ahead. Oh, we have a question. Desiree, go ahead and unmute. What is your question?
So sorry to answer ask as soon as you are about to sign off, but really quick question. Um, so you have two programs that I'm interested in. Is it looked down upon if you apply for both, or is it possible to get accepted to both? And just your thoughts on looking into, like, I know you probably see applicants apply for multiple things. Just the thought from your point of view, the directors and the people who are reviewing the applications.
Excellent question, Desiree, and I'll answer that question more thoroughly than you probably want. From my perspective, as someone who runs accelerator programs, and I have multiple accelerators with multiple focus areas, it often makes a lot of sense for people to apply to multiple. For example, I have one right now that's an impact accelerator in mental and behavioral health. And then I have a community health incubator. I think it makes an incredible amount of sense for people to apply to both of those programs. And they're both very different, have different outcomes. And one of them has a lower barrier to entry and is easier to get into. And one of them is extremely challenging to get into. But why not shoot your shot? Because it's an incredible program with partnerships. Not that to me, there's nothing wrong with that. I have worked for grad school programs where it was not oh, it was seen as like this person's indecisive if they applied to multiple programs. So I only caveat that to say, like, in my case, no, not an issue, but it won't always be the case. So I want to make sure that you understand that maybe it's maybe so there is some detriment to it sometimes, but not in my particular case. No. Great. Oh, we are at time, and I want to honor everyone's schedules. And thank you for the question, Desiree. Always love questions, and I look forward to following up with you all. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.